Welcome to the training for active supervision. We're going to be talking about multiple aspects of what it means to actively supervise a child. Let me give you a short definition. Supervising is not just saying, I'm sitting in a classroom, I'm sitting at the desk, and I'm watching the children. Active supervision means that I actively pursue certain aspects, certain ideas and concepts to watch the children and supervise them during the day. And so we're going to be walking through some of those principles and how to apply them. First, let me remind you again, we have a performance standard, a set of laws, and you see on the screen just one simple example of what you find in this book. They're called Performance Standards and Strategies. And you'll notice here that on the screen it has the numbers 1302.90 C1, V, or 5. What that simply is, and since everybody kind of knows as a minister, we talk about the Bible and we say, turn your Bible to John chapter 3, verse 16. All that is how you locate where we're going to start reading. When we look at a performance standard, we look at it the same way. You open up the book to the location of the standard number 1302.9, meaning that there's a whole lot of other 1302s in there. So that'd be like the verse. And then you go down C15, that is an underlined outline. When we get to C, we find standards of conduct, and we read the words, a program must ensure all staff, consultants, contractors, or volunteers abide by the program standards of conduct that, and item 5 is specifically what we're dealing with here, ensure no child is left alone or supervised by a staff, consultants, contractors, or volunteers while under their care. You'll notice on the screen that I've highlighted this in yellow. This whole training is predicated on solving or answering how we provide that a child is never left alone or unsupervised. So everything about this training is to fulfill this one single aspect of the law. Why? Because as you already know from other trainings, safety of the children is a predominant issue for all of Head Start, and so we're going to describe how you as a teacher or you as a FACS will actively supervise a child. You're going to see 6 things here on the screen. You may want to write these down because we're going to go through them step by step. These are the 6 elements to active supervision. The first one, set up the environment. We're going to be talking specifically about each one, so you write down set up the environment. 2, scan and count. 3, anticipate children's behavior. Number 4, position staff. Number 5, listen. And number 6, engage and direct. As you write them down, let's kind of walk through them now step by step. The first one is set up the environment. This is about your classroom. Now, you should have done this at the beginning of the year, but you need to pay attention in the mornings when you're coming in and you're assessing your classroom. Make sure that things are at a proper place. You'll see here that the proper thing to do is to set up the environment so that you can supervise the children and be accessible at all times. So you need to be able to get across the room in a quick fashion. You need to be able to see in the room. You don't need to have blind spots where you can't see children. So try to limit that by setting up the room so that you can see what's taking place. When group activities are taken together around the furniture, things shouldn't be more than waist high so that you can see over them, you can see what's happening, and you can also hear the children. So small places need to be kept clutter-free, big spaces set up so that the children have clear spaces to play. And when we're talking about that, you're setting up the room so that you can supervise them. You can see what's taking place. You can see how you move them around the room. So that's the part about setting up the room. So there's the initial setup of your classroom at the beginning of the year. Then there's the setup daily to make sure that the room is cleared in a fashion that you can move around quickly and get to the children because you've got a safe environment. So that's the first thing about preparing yourself for active supervision, is being able to move quickly and having an environment that's safe for that opportunity. Scan and count is the second item. You're going to be hearing this throughout the whole training. Scan and count, scan and count. Staff is always able to count and account for the children in their care. They continually scan the entire environment to know where everyone is and what they're doing. They count the children frequently. This is especially important during transitions when children are moving from one location to another. When you're moving from one location to another, obviously it's always good to try to have the children walking in a line rather than just walking willy-nilly down the hallway in group fashion. It's much easier to count them in the line, but you should scan and count. Scan what's going on around you, be aware of what's taking place, and count the children. You should do that throughout the day. In another training that we presented a while back, we pointed out that you should not be on your cell phone or on other electronics during this time. This prohibits you from being able to scan and count on a regular basis. Always watch the room, because if there are any hidden places in the environment, you want to make sure that if a child is in one of those places, that you can account for them, and if you miscount or you see a difference in your count, you want to check to see where they're located. So a constant scan and count. It's always a practice to develop on a regular basis. The third thing that we're going to look at is anticipate children's behavior. This may not be something that you grasp in a child's life early on, but let's look at what it says about that. Staff use what they know about each child's individual interests and skills to predict what he or she will do. They create challenges that children are ready for and support them in succeeding. But they also recognize when children might wonder, get upset, or take a dangerous risk. Information form the daily health check informs staff's observations and helps them anticipate children's behavior. Staff who know what to expect are better able to protect children from harm. Let's use an example I used in another training. Occasionally we don't want to label a child, but we notice that a child has a habit that we're working with of biting. If you're aware that the child is a biter, let's call them a biter, you can anticipate children's behavior. Oftentimes you can see a trigger that's going to cause a child, they have a favorite toy in the room, or they have someone that they seem to be easily annoyed at. If you start to recognize this trait in a child, then you can anticipate before the child bites someone that they're about to reach that level. Maybe they have a particular action. Maybe they say something, or they have a noise or something that they do. They shout, something of that nature, and you can anticipate their behavior. So as you learn your children, you'll learn that some children are quieter than others, some children respond differently. Try to assimilate those things into your mindset so that if you see a potential risk or danger, you can anticipate how to deal with that. There are other anticipations that are not negative. You can anticipate how children behave in a positive manner with one another, and you can use that to encourage the children. You can use that to support other children that might need to have that encouragement. You could even place two children together that you can anticipate good behavior or playtime together. So using anticipation is a way of learning more about your children, learning how to anticipate both positive and negative behaviors. It might do well, as it says in this paragraph, to walk through your health check and remind yourself on a regular basis what's been happening in the room, in the classroom with the children, and what things you have learned to predict in advance for their behavior. The fourth item is position staff. Usually you have your teacher and your teacher's assistant in the room. You may also have a fax in the room, or a program manager, other people who are there. It's possible that you could have a volunteer person in the room. Always position your staff in such a way that you can see the whole environment. This would be a good place for me to point out. It's not good for two employees to be standing in the room side by side having side conversations about what took place last night on TV or whatever. It keeps you in a position where you're not properly positioning one another. If you know you have blind spots in the room because of your environmental check, maybe position one staff where they can see somebody on one side of the room where you can't see them, and then you position yourself in another. To read the paragraph here, it says you carefully plan where you position themselves in the environment to prevent children from harm. They place themselves so that they can see and hear all the children in their care. They make sure that there are always clear paths to where children are playing, sleeping, and eating so that they can react quickly when necessary. Staff stay close to children who may need additional support. Their location helps them provide support if necessary. Let's try to flow in that same illustration about a biter. If you know you have a biter, maybe you position someone nearby that's not really interceding right away, but giving the child a chance to be the child, but close enough by that should the child want to try to bite someone, you could intervene and prevent that from happening. That's a good sign, use of staff positioning. The other staff positioning, again, is watching for the blind spots, and we talked about that, and also just being there to help the children in their playtime or learning time, being nearby. Positioning staff also includes when one staff member is maybe reading the story, the other staff member is in a watching position or assisting with a child that needs special assistance during that time. Always positioning yourself to be able to handle the situations that might arise. Number 5, listen. Specific sounds or absence of them may signify reason for concern. Staff who are listening closely to children immediately identify signs of potential danger. Programs that think systemically implement additional strategies to safeguard children. For example, bells added to doors help alert staff when a child tries to leave the room. Paying attention to the sounds around you. You have a lot of things. If you're, again, accustomed to someone who makes particular sounds right before they have responses, anger issues, then you pay attention to those kinds of sounds. Oftentimes, no sound is just as risky as loud sounds. You find children who are quietly playing someplace, if they get too quiet, something might be happening that you need to be checking on. I like to think about an example. When my oldest child was a small boy, he and his cousins were playing in his room, and my wife and brother-in-law and we were all sitting in the living room, and we noticed it got very, very quiet, and we said, hey, we better check on them. It's unusually quiet. And what we discovered was that my son had been gifted a small pocket knife that we had put away, but he found, and he and his cousin were quietly cutting the top of his toy box, slicing it all open all over the place. So we discovered right away that no noise was just as dangerous as noise. So be aware, when things get really quiet, maybe something's going on. So pay attention to your environment, listen to what's being said, listen to what's being done. You might hear an ensuing conversation from two children that is great for retelling a story later. You might also hear a conversation that indicates that there's about to be a problem coming forth. And if you use your previous example of anticipating a child's behavior, if you're listening to them, you may be also able to anticipate what's about to happen coming down the line of actions. Number 6, engage and direct. The more that you know about your child, the more that you understand what a child is doing or kind of actions they have, you might be able to engage them in activities. This paragraph says staff use what they know about each child's individual needs and development to offer support. Staff wait until children are unable to solve problems on their own to get involved. They may offer different levels of assistance or redirections depending on each level of child's needs. In this particular case, knowing what a child's capable of, you can sometimes step up and engage them and direct them in something. I watched a teacher recently who was watching all the children and telling them, and it was early on in the school year, that they needed to be able to open their own milk as they were sitting at the lunch, and the little cartons. I watched, she gave direction, and then she was watching each of the children, and as each of the children began to try to open it, she engaged with them, walking around saying, okay, you're almost there, pull it open right here, push your thumb over here. That's an example of engaging and directing in active supervision. She was watching what their needs were, she was anticipating what they might need help with, and then she engaged each child at whatever level they needed to learn to open the milk. It was a great example of engaging and directing the children. It was also a great example that she was already able to anticipate from child to child who was struggling because she'd been watching from the days before which child might have problems and how they might be encouraged. So that was, to me, a great example of actively supervising your children, being aware of the environment, watching how a child responds, and as well, engaging and directing them in the proper behavior. And she did not jump in and do the milk for them. She waited until they were almost unable to reach that level, and then she began to engage them, giving them instructions on how to do it. That was a prime example of a teacher who really understood active supervision. So let's walk through some examples here. I have some examples, and you don't have a classroom here, so I'll just read it for you and think it through. Maria and Yasmin have taken their classroom of 3-year-old children to the playground for outdoor playtime. The 15-foot square playground has a plastic climber, a water sand table, and a swing set. Maria and Yasmin stand at opposite quarters of the playground so they can move quickly when a child needs assistance. What example of active supervision would that be? They position themselves because they have different items taking place, different playground activities that are available to the children. You probably already have the answer. There it is, position staff. They position themselves in different locations so that they can move quickly. If you've got a climber option over there, a place to climb, you might want to be close if somebody looks like they could fall. In the playground area, you notice it wasn't really very large, so they positioned themselves so that they could see what was taking place. It's a good time for me to say recreation, playtime, recess, however you call that, is not a time for 2 employees to stand on one corner and have a conversation again about what took place last evening in their homes. It's the time to be actively supervising the children. It's not break time for us as staff. So recess is not break time. Recess is another opportunity to actively supervise our children. Let's walk through another scenario. Maria and Yasmin are going to get a lot of work today. They always count the children assigned to them, occasionally raising their fingers to show each other how many children they have. They keep track of where the children are and make sure no one is missing. If one child moves to a different area of the playground, they signal to each other so they are both aware. This would actually could be more than one item. So let's look at what the answer would be. Scan and count. Yes, because why? They're both scanning and counting. But I would also say that if you thought, well, positioning of staff, that is included because they've kept themselves in a position where they can even use hand signals. I've got 5 over here. I've got 3 over here. And so maybe positioning of staff, but really I wanted you to say scan and count would be a good answer. All right, Maria knows that Felicity throws toys without looking. As she sees Felicity and Ahmad playing in the sand table, Maria stands behind Felicity and suggests she put the toy back in the basket when she's done. Well, it could be a variety of answers again. There's one better than others. Did you say positioning staff because she positioned herself in position? Or did you say, anticipate the behavior? That's the correct answer. She already knows about the child possibly being one that will throw things, so she's going to anticipate the behavior. But you also could have said that she was going to actively direct the child. So, wow, 3 possible answers, but it all starts with she was in position and able to direct because she anticipated. Let's go to another one. Kellen has been experimenting with some of the climbing equipment and jumps from the 3rd step onto the ground. The motor skills of some of the other children are not as advanced, but they also try to do it. To help build these skills, Yasmin stands close to the steps on the climbing structure. This is pretty challenging. Some of you are probably tempted to say, well, we shouldn't be letting the child, Kellen, jump off of the 3rd step. Well, it could be that Kellen's very good at it, and you're letting him grow in his own way. So you know his behavior, you're letting him grow. But as you watch the other children, they're not capable of doing that. So rather than restricting him from growing, you're helping the others. So what would we be doing? Well, we're not positioning ourselves, but what we are doing is anticipating the behavior. And some of you might have even said, and I don't think it would have been a wrong answer, giving engagement and direction. So I think you could have had anticipate, engagement, and direction. Let's move to another example. Maria and Yasmin are back together again, and they signal to each other 5 minutes before playtime is over. Then they tell the children they have 5 minutes left to play. When the children have 1 minute left, Maria hands out coloring circles that match colored squares painted on the ground. They're beginning to what? Anticipate the children. They're listening to the children. I don't like the word listening. I thought that was a poor answer, but that was the answer that our guidance gave. I think they anticipated the behavior. They also gave direction and engagement. Why? Because they saw that 5 minutes was coming. They anticipated the children needed a transition. They gave them a 1 minute left to help them with the transition, and they gave them direction and engagement. So even though the answer officially was listen, I think they had to be paying attention to the children. I believe direction and engagement were good. Yasmin heads to the line, takes the back end, holds Beto's hand. What are we doing? We're positioning ourselves. That was a pretty easy one. Okay, so at this time we're going to show a video. And on this video, I want you to pay attention. This video is using double Dutch and children jumping in double Dutch. So pay attention to the instructions of the man who sets the video up, and we'll be back after the video is finished. Okay, welcome back. Well, that was an interesting video. I hope you did well. I'll have to admit that when I watched the video the first time, I didn't see the clown, I didn't see the color background, and I didn't see him change from one person to another jumping rope. But I did get the right count on the number of jumps. Whoopee, right? So you actually, as we've walked through this active supervision, now you see how easy it is in a classroom to miss something. And if I can reiterate again, that's why we can't be distracted with phones, we can't be distracted with anything else. It's so easy to miss something when there's a lot of action taking place all around us. Let's look at some of the ways that we use our policy now to make sure that we're following in this safe environment for our children. One of the things that we've implemented in our policy that helps us in our scan and count and keeping track is name-to-face matching. So let's have a look at this. What is name-to-face matching? Name-to-face matching is a child's face to a written documentation of their name, showing presence. Name-to-face is taken as, number one, looking at a child's face, matching face to their name on the attendance sheet and marking them present. Looking at a child's face, matching face to their name as a visual tool as pictures, charts, paddle boards, and marking them as present. So example being, at the beginning of the year, you'll notice that your cubbies, if you didn't set it up already, you should, have a picture of the child with the child's name. This helps the child to recognize where to put their clothing, but it helps you every time you see the child, you see the face, the name. You also have at the beginning of the year the little wristbands that has the child's name on their wristband, and they'll do that. They'll wear those for the first month of the program. And so every time that you do this, you see this happen in hospitals. The hospitals come in, they ask you your name, they look at your face, and they look at your armband. What you're doing is you're establishing in your brain the face recognition with the name. It's always good as often as you can at the beginning of the year. When you look at a child across the room, call them by name. I know we're doing scan and counts. We're counting the children. As often as you can, name the child by name as you go through. What happens is now you've gotten accustomed to it and you begin to have that name face recognition. You recognize when a child is missing. Even if you didn't miss them in the count, you missed their name or you missed their face, you saw that they were missing. So establish that early on, and it also helps the child to know that you know them, you care for them because you called them by name. Teachers take attendance daily. When you come in, you have your green book. I'm going to use this as the example. You have your green attendance book. At the arrival, the child you take attendance and you establish in your iPad or on Child Plus that you have the same children that were on the bus manifest. So you check that and you cross-check it so that you've checked your attendance. Then when it comes time for meals, you're required to have attendance again, and as you see on your screen, you're required also by your CACFP, which is the food grant, to show that you've checked the children. Now follow the procedures for checking the children, because you have to put the proper markings on that list to satisfy the grant for CACFP. So it's not just simply putting a check mark, you have to put the right symbols in for them to properly be counted. So those are times that you're taking specific attendance. When you finish taking attendance, you're supposed to post the number of children you have present in your classroom near your doorway. I know that one of the things that you have now are these white paddles. You can write on that and you can have that with you. That helps you to be reminded of how many children that you have. So it's important for you to have it listed where if anybody else comes in, they know how many children you're supposed to have. It's a reminder for yourself. It's also a reminder that as you've taken attendance, your attendance matches the numbers that you have listed in the various locations in your classroom. Teachers use the appropriate protocol for counting for each transition. Appropriate protocol includes name-to-face counting at each threshold transition to and from the restrooms. So let's stop there. When you leave the room, the word threshold is literally crossing the doorway. Now, you may have carpet or tile on the floor and don't have a physical threshold, but it's called a threshold when you cross from the room to the hallway. You've crossed into the threshold. So when you move out of the classroom to go to the restroom, you are to count when you leave the classroom. That means literally stop outside the classroom. Did you have 10 in the classroom when you were in the classroom? You should have 10 standing out in the hallway. Likewise, if you don't have that happening, you've left a child in the room. I don't think you should have 11 when you leave if you only had 10 when you were in the room. The chances are your count would say you're missing a child, so you have 9. So you make sure when you cross to go to the restroom, you have the same number of children you began with. When you go to the cafeteria, the same thing is true. Pay attention. When you leave the classroom, you count. When you get to the cafeteria, you count again. Why? Because when you pass through a doorway, you cross a threshold. You count again. I didn't say it a moment ago, but when you go to the restroom, when they go into the restroom and they come out of the restroom, you need to stop and count again. That's what scan and count means in this particular case. Every time you cross a threshold, you count. It seems redundant, but that's what protects the children. If you go to the gym, if you go to the outside play area, every time you pass through a door, you count. Appropriate protocol for transitions includes counting and visuals with other resources. In some cases, you need to stop and literally take attendance, and your book notes that when you're supposed to take attendance. If you're required to take attendance, you need to take attendance and mark it. Okay? You, as teachers and teachers' age, you need to confirm with each other how many you're counting. Teachers often engage activities with the children. I watched one classroom where the teacher asked the children to count themselves. She touched each child on the head, and what she did was she called them by name. Johnny, Susie, so-and-so, and so-and-so, and the children counted. 1, 2, 3, and all of the children counted, whether their head was being touched or not, and when it was finished, she said, "How many children do we have?" And all the children shouted out, 13. So she used counting, she used face scanning, and she used this recognition, and she helped the children to engage all at the same time. That kept the children standing still while they were being counted. It gave them an activity to do. You don't have to do that every time, but you can see the concept. Let's go on. Staff will continue to scan the classroom while diapering one child and will alert another teaching staff if a potential safety issue arises. In some cases, if you're in early Head Start, you have to diaper a child, and while you're diapering the child, unfortunately, it does not release you from watching around the room the other children. So remember, we talked about positioning staff, we talked about the environment, being able to see. So while you're diapering and you're speaking to the child, You should be able to look around and maybe alert the teaching staff if something else is going on. Maybe a child is crawling too close to a set of toys that needs to be moved back. So be aware of what's happening, even if you're diapering or taking children to the toilet. Many of you have restrooms inside your classrooms, and so you have to be aware of the multitude of actions that can be happening at the same time. So let's go to talk about that in the restroom. When children are in the restroom, all teaching staff remain actively engaged with children. One teaching staff member remains with children not using the restroom, while the other remains with children who are in the restroom. Once all children are finished, one teacher sweeps each stall, ensuring that all children are with the group. Teachers then complete a name-to-face count before leaving the restroom and confirm that all children brought to the restroom are leaving together from the restroom. Let's slow down on this. Yes, you're going to go, and I keep using the number 10, it's just easy. If you have 10 children, let's say that there are 5 boys and 5 girls. You can station one teacher outside, and the teacher can follow in the girls, and then maybe another teacher can follow the boys in, and vice versa. When you're finished, even if you counted and you have 10 children outside of the restroom, you still need to go in and scan the restroom stalls. Why? Because we had an incident some time back that caused us with a deficiency. A teacher had 11 children. 11 went in, 10 came out. They proceeded down the hallway, leaving one child in the restroom. If you took 10 children in 2 minutes later and you took your 10 out, where's that extra child? They're still left behind in the restroom. If you scan the restroom and you find the extra child that's missing, even if your previous teacher overlooked it, you have prevented a child from being left alone in an unsafe situation. So even though you have your 10 children, if you do not scan the restroom stalls, you have the potential of leaving behind an additional child. So we want to make sure that we not only account for our own children, but we account that the restrooms are left empty when we have completed this process. I realize it seems like it's redundant, but without that redundancy, we have the child placed at risk. And since it has happened in the past, we are not going to have it happen if we apply these principles one step at a time. As teachers and children transition from the restroom, one teacher remains in the front of the line, walking backward, while the other is in the back of the line. Teachers scan and count. I know, you just counted coming out of the restroom. That's why if they're walking in a nice, neat line, we've used in the past bubbles and ducktails. We tell the children to open their mouth and catch a bubble. That helps them to be quiet. We tell them to walk with their hands behind their back like this, making a ducktail. That helps them to walk, and while they're walking, then you can scan and count. If you're in the front, you can count backwards. If you're in the back, you can count looking forwards. You're constantly scanning and counting. Why? Because it's active supervision. When children are in the restroom washing their hands, and the teaching staff remain actively engaged with the children. One teaching staff member remains with the children not using the restroom, while the other remains with the children who are in the restroom. Once all children are finished, the teacher sweeps the classroom. Wow, didn't we just read that? Yes, we did. Teachers then complete the name-to-face count. Why are we saying this over and over? Because we have to provide for the safety of the children. And apparently in the past, when we've had a deficiency, when we didn't keep count, and we didn't sweep the restroom, and we didn't watch the number of children face to face, we had a child that showed up missing. So because of that, we're reiterating, you will follow this policy. If you're a teacher or a teacher's aide, and you see your coworker not following the policy, please remind them of the importance of following this policy. And if that's not going to be significant, I'm going to ask you to report it that we're not following the policy. Because not following the policy is going to put us into a position where we are not complying with what we say we're doing. Lastly, you're going to see somebody come around and do what's called monitoring. we're going to be watching to see if this policy and procedure is properly being implemented. So you might as well apply it as a day-to-day ongoing practice, because from time to time when you're monitored, you're going to be checked to see if you're actually following the policy. Don't recite the policy and say you do it without practicing it. We need you to practice the policy. At any given moment, if somebody happens to randomly stop by, they should find this as part of your regular practice, scanning and counting, face-to-face, looking at the children, checking the toilets and the little rooms in the restrooms after everybody is finished. That is an ongoing, day-to-day, hourly practice. As teachers and children transition from the restroom, the teacher remains in the front of the line, walking backward. Wow, said it again. When children are transitioning to and from outdoor spaces, all teaching staff remain actively engaged with the children. At arrival and departure of the outdoor play areas, teachers instruct the children to line up at the fence. Teachers complete the name-to-face count prior to leaving the outdoor play area. One teacher sweeps the play area, ensuring that all children are with the group. Once again, we're looking for our number that we've counted, but we're not going to leave without looking. Some of the play areas have little boxes underneath that the children can go in and out of underneath the slide, and they have little walls on them, and you can look through the windows, but children love to hide. And sometimes in transition, you think you've counted, but a child is hiding. If there happens to be an opportunity where two classrooms are on the playground at the same time, it may be that each teacher has counted and yet a child still is hiding in one of the play areas. Please be sure that while all of your children are standing against the fence, you have scanned this and you've made sure you've looked in all of the playground areas that might have been a place where you couldn't see before. Remember, in your active supervision, this is setting up the environment, looking to make sure there's no hidden places, and also staff positioning. While one staff member is watching the children, the other one is going and checking to make sure that it's completely safe and the children have left the area and are ready to transition. Teachers then complete a name-to-face count before leaving the outdoor play area. Now, we just did it on side the fence. Now we're getting ready to leave. What have we done? We've left the fence. We've crossed the threshold. We're going to count again. How many times are we going to count each day? Probably 50 or more, because every time there's a transition, we're going to make a count. We're going to count over and over. But the more that we count and the more that we're assured, the easier it is not to lose someone. Teachers are going to scan and count as they walk down the hallway. Teachers are going to complete the safety check outdoor. You need to check to make sure that there's no trash left behind and that your gates are securely latched. Those are items that you do as you leave the area. Try to remember that if you leave a gate open, there are animals that walk through in some places. There are things they like to pick at trash, so we're picking the area up. It's not just about looks, it's about making sure that there's nothing that causes animals to want to run in and out and cause other safety hazards. Safe staff activity: anticipate challenging behaviors, holding a child's hand, suggesting children hold hands. When you're walking down the hallway, I just gave you an example a few moments ago of using bubbles and ducktails. Another would be having the children hold hands as they walk down. If possibly we have children who want to meander, having them hold each other's hands. You can tell quickly if one has broken free from another hand. Hey, rejoin your hands. Sometimes they use ropes that you can hold on to, have all the children hold on to a rope as you transition out. Sometimes you can give children specific jobs, line leader, and give them an opportunity to lead the line. The person in the back of the line gets to count while they're looking forward at the children. Giving them jobs to do is very helpful in moving them from one place to another. Maybe it allows for it, maybe it doesn't. We also had teachers who sang songs. Sing a song that all the children can learn to sing. Maybe it's a counting song, or maybe it's a song about going out for activities. Give them something to do. Of course, in some hallways, in some classroom areas, you can't sing in the hallway. You have to be quiet because there are other children. But use appropriate actions to help the children to transition. I think we've pretty much finished this whole training. I hope that you've learned something else about active supervision. I know that there was redundancy in scan and count, but we've had issues where that has just slipped through the cracks. We cannot have you participating in opportunities to lose children, so please be careful. Enjoy yourself with your children. Use counting as a way to teach them and train them, and have a great day. Thank you for attending this training.